So what we want to talk about today, primary thing we'll be going over is going to be asset management. Kind of segueing into what that actually looks like, starting to talk a little bit more in depth about post-close. What happens? That's when the fun happens, right? Everything we've talked about up until now is literally only like 20% of the work of like getting a deal closed. It just seems like a lot because it takes a lot to get there. But once you get it closed, then the real work begins. So talking about the remaining percentage of how to make sure it operates and operates efficiently today, we're going to be just talking, it's going to be part one of asset management. So we'll be going over a lot of kind of like basic information as far as what exactly asset management entails, what to look for in a potential asset manager, whether that be you, whether that be a business partner, or whether that be an actual asset management type employee that you hire into your company, and what are some duties, roles, responsibilities, characteristic traits you should be looking for in that kind of a person. So we're going to go over that. I have a feeling it's not going to last the entire time. So when we finish, I will open up questions like we usually do. And then if there's time left, we can underwrite a deal or do whatever you guys want to do. So jumping in. Asset management, part one. Asset management is one of the most important things in multifamily real estate investing. Again, whether that be you, whether that be a business partner, or whether that be an employee, if you're not properly managing your asset, you can forget about making money. Asset management involves the practice of overseeing the performance of a single asset or group of assets to make sure that it complies with its objectives and generates a positive return. An asset manager's job is to ensure everything that your assets get done, make sure everything about your assets gets done correctly. Whether it's done by you, done by an employee, or done by a business that you hire. You can actually hire like third-party businesses as well to help do some of your asset management. I have never found any of them to be very successful, which is why we do all of our own asset management in-house. An asset manager who works at a better elevation compared to a property manager is responsible for ensuring that your business strategy is carried out properly. This means adhering to your goals for the property, whatever those goals are. Hopefully, if this is a business partner, they're very much in tune, if not more in tune with the business plan than you are, and can actually go out and implement on whatever the business plan is. So we'll be talking more about like implementation another time. But anyway, with asset management, property is only one asset that you're managing, or the property specifically. You're also managing your investors' money. It involves increasing the profitability of the investment, increasing income, decreasing expenses, increasing the value of the property, streamlining processes, and executing on your business plan. Of course, a big part of that is managing the property itself. Numbers are important, but you also have to keep tenants happy. Property grounds need to be maintained. Individual units need repairs and maintenance to be done in a timely manner. Tenants need to feel safe. Rents need to be paid on time, and more. In a nutshell, an asset manager focuses on the long-term strategies, maximize property value and ROI, whereas a property manager deals with more of the day-to-day matters of finding good tenants, overseeing renovations, collecting rent, paying vendors, financial reporting, and executing leases. And honestly, sometimes the asset manager, or most of the time, the asset manager is really controlling and managing a lot of the renovation, kind of like construction management. They kind of fall in two different categories, right? Or three different categories: property management, asset management, and construction management. All managing something, but they're kind of all three little sectors that you could potentially have three different people or three separate companies managing if you wanted to do it that way. Asset management is one of the most vital factors to ensure your property succeeds both short and long term, because let's face it, an investment deal can look stellar on paper, but if you're not performing the actions to carry out that said business plan, your property is going to be in trouble. If they're not invested in carrying out your strategy, your property also may find itself in jeopardy. This is why it's important to understand how necessary it is for your real estate investments. So this is kind of like, if we get to the point where we have a legitimate employee or someone that's not directly tied to like the investment itself, how do we actually entice them, make them interested enough to perform? And asset managers get paid a hefty penny. Starting pay, depending on how large your portfolio is, with a size of my portfolio of like 1,000 units or less, starting pay is around 100 to 130,000 for an asset manager, and that's full time. You typically get a ton of benefits too. Like you typically get a car because there's a lot of travel involved with asset management. So car comes with it. And this is if you want to be competitive, that is, insurance, 401k, if you wanted to do that, which we probably wouldn't do 401k. We're real estate investors. So we'll probably say, hey, you can just get a slice of the investment as a part of like your retirement plan if you perform at a certain level. And then of course there would be like bonuses all along the way of if you can achieve X NOI by X date, then you'll get a whatever 5%, 10% bonus. So if the NOI is currently $100,000 a year, if you can get us to $150,000 a year by the end of the year, so that we can execute on a refi, which is what our initial business plan is with our investors, then you'll get like 20% of the proceeds or something. I don't know, something crazy. That's like how you could structure the bonuses. But anyway, that's for another time. Number two, the importance of excellent asset management. One of the highly crucial aspects of successful multifamily real estate investment is asset management. Property managers will also be made responsible for the services that they provide by the asset manager. So not only is property management critical because they're your day-to-day operations of actually achieving said business plan, but your asset manager is equally responsible, whether that be, again, a business partner, yourself, or someone else. Because if you are not making sure that the property manager is doing what they should be doing, then the deal is not going to be successful. There's plenty of people, even really good property managers, require asset management because things are going to slip through the cracks. They're going to forget about some things. They're going to forget that the business plan was to do X, Y, Z. Or they're going to be so caught up in the minutia of this big construction plan, renovation budget thing that you have that, oh my goodness, they forgot some large thing, like you were supposed to rewire 10 of the units and they forgot the specific units you were supposed to rewire, and they already got everything re-sheetrocked and finished and tenants scheduled to move in, and they never even did the rewire. Like, you just never know what they're going to forget, what's going to slip past them. They're typically not construction management professionals. So that's why usually us as asset managers are primarily handling a lot of the construction management. And it's all stuff that we're trying to pay heavy, close attention to. And even after you actually close the deal and go through all of the CapEx and all the renovations and the assets officially stabilized, whatever that looks like for your deal, you still have some asset management to do. Now, it won't be as stringent as when you're doing and executing your large scale value add business plan, whatever that was, but it's still nonetheless going to require maybe a monthly or quarterly even, instead of like weekly call or daily call if it's super intense. And honestly, even outside the calls, it usually requires a lot of on-site presence. That's why I was saying it requires a lot of travel being an asset manager. Most of the time when you have someone asset managing a particular property, you want them to be local. It's not an entirely a requirement for them to be local because they can get on a plane and fly if they really wanted to, but it benefits them. And it benefits you, honestly, if they are local, because it makes it easier for them to go and see the property at any given time when they need to. So if it requires them to be present and you're like, hey, can you fly out? And they're like, I've got this, and this happening. This, and this happening doesn't matter as much if they live 10 minutes from the property. Because it's like, dude, it's just going to take 10 minutes for you to go out there. And then it'll take 20 to 30 minutes for you to do whatever you got to do. And then you can go back and do whatever it is you're talking about. Whereas if they got to fly out, it's like it's going to take all day, or it's going to take multiple days. I got to get a hotel. So locale is extremely important. And if you're thinking about potentially hiring someone to be your asset manager, then if they're not local when you hire them, then a requirement of the job is that they relocate to wherever your assets are, which is a massive benefit of having a portfolio in a localized area. So when you start scaling and growing your portfolio, one thing to think about is if you buy a ton of assets here, a ton of assets up in New York, a ton of assets in California, a bunch in Utah, a bunch in Texas. I mean, it's great. You got some geographical diversification, but it's going to be really hard to manage all that from so many different areas. So if you buy a big portfolio in a somewhat localized area, whether it be the same MSA or just like 2 or 3 close MSAs within maybe an hour or so of each other, then it becomes much more manageable, much more feasible and scalable, honestly, when you start getting to the point where you're hiring things out. Because then you're not having to hire like 3 different asset managers for all these different locations. You can just have one, and it'd be much more scalable. Anyway, something to think about. They'll also guarantee that the correct type of community is created for your residents. So the property manager should be the one actually creating this community and the one creating like who actually qualifies. And that should all be talked about with your property manager as you're going through that process. But if you're not paying close attention, they may let people slip through the cracks, because you may have some kind of incentive that says, hey, if PM gets certain level of occupancy or whatever in a certain time frame, they get a bonus. And they're like, ooh, let's just get warm bodies in so we can get the bonus. So you want to make sure that there's stipulations to what those bonuses are first and foremost with your property management company. But even outside of that, if there was no bonus, sometimes they just don't do all that they're supposed to do. Even if they do what they're supposed to do, like 98% of the time, there's always going to be something that slips through the cracks. And so if you're not paying attention, then not to say it's going to be detrimental by any means, depends what's slipping through the cracks, but it could end up being detrimental if you're not focusing on paying attention to this asset. So multifamily properties are an excellent place to start. You're not locking away your cash for a long time because these properties frequently already have revenue. To optimize your profit, you may be able to make some basic changes, reorganize certain management processes. It's generally less expensive to renovate many apartments in the same location than it is to renovate in various regions if you were to buy like a single family portfolio or something of the same. So with multifamily spaces, there's typically a lot less risk when it comes to investing, of course, in that asset class. Like we were just talking about, not spacing it out too far, for your asset manager. So number 3, what are 10 specific strategies for effectively asset managing? Like, what are the specific tips and tricks that one needs to know or needs to have at top of mind when A, thinking about buying a deal, B, thinking about a business plan, or C, thinking about a business partner or an employee that you're going to actually bring on to be your asset manager? So number 1, different properties, different requirements. As much as one would like to create a whole bunch of systems and operations revolved around on how to simply and easily asset manage every single property in the entire world, whereas there are some systems and automations and things we can do to streamline that, every property is going to be different. Every business plan is going to be different. So there are going to be some nuances that will have to tweak and shift and change with each property. Each property is distinct, presents its own set of challenges. While it would be ideal to entirely automate the remodeling process, active investing entails examining each property individually, devising a customized strategy to optimize your income potential. So honestly, if you have an asset manager, or if you have like a part as a part of your team or as an employee, that person is going to be responsible for all of the actual like renovation budget and CapEx kind of construction and typically construction management, like all the way from getting the deal under contract and getting quotes and finalizing what needs to be done and how it needs to be done and what the phases of that being completed are. They're equally going to be responsible for building out your actual business plan and timeline of everything getting completed. And then that's all going to kind of flow and funnel through to your investor relations person, who's then going to be responsible for finalizing that and creating some form of a pitch deck to send out to your investors. So when I remember that, and I'm thinking about it because of this whole automating the remodeling process piece, whereas that sounds great, it sounds nice. Obviously that is something that you'll have to do on a very deal by deal specific basis in terms of what needs to be done. But there's other things that you can automate and like systems that you utilize to put things in. So you'll have like maybe a specific spreadsheet or something that you put all of the CapEx budget timeline in on every deal. So you pull up the spreadsheet, say we need to have this, and this done. And then when you put that in, it automatically populates whatever, like how long it's going to take to do each one of those things based on your experience and how long it's taken you to do those before, what the cost is, what the general like cost is for those things. And then poof, it should spit out whatever the timeline to complete it would be on a generalized basis. But again, every property is specific. So there will be some ways to automate it, but there'll be some nuances as well. If some of the properties are in poor physical condition, to make them safe and desirable to buyers and tenants, structural or aesthetic changes may be required. Some properties may have been destroyed by natural catastrophes and have remained unoccupied because the owners couldn't afford to fix them. Others are just out of date in terms of upkeep and require only modest repairs and upgrades. There are difficulties with other qualities that aren't as noticeable. Some properties have management challenges that prohibit them from making as much money as they can, simply a loss to lease or management play, or honestly vacancy issue if they really just suck at leasing and marketing. An active investor can bring in new management and teach them to turn the business around. Certain attributes will require pivoting. An investor can improve the amenities and rearrange the marketing to appeal to a different audience. And that'll all be primarily controlled and managed from the asset manager. So whereas you may have an initial business plan, as you actually get into the asset, 9 times out of 10, it's not, the business plan isn't going to like completely pivot and suddenly you go from a perpetuity model type hold to, oh my gosh, we need to sell in 30 days. There's not going to be anything ridiculous. But if it does shift, 9 times out of 10, it will shift in some form or fashion. So your actual asset manager having the capacity to pivot and to tweak with what needs to shift, whether that be, oh my gosh, we had planned on renovating all the units to XYZ caliber, which was going to allow us to achieve XYZ rent. But suddenly we found this massive issue with the roof, and now the roof needs to be replaced, and this needs to happen. So now we've lost $300,000 in our renovation budget. We have significantly less capital to complete the rest of the units. So what we're going to have to do instead is blah, blah, blah. And that's going to allow us to achieve this level of income. And then that person, that asset manager is going to be responsible for going back and checking and confirming that the asset can actually still perform at whatever you initially projected now that those tweaks or those changes had to be made. And then they'll have to schedule those tweaks and changes to be made with the contractors through that process. So number 2, spend your money when necessary. Everyone enters multifamily syndication with 2 aims in mind: spend as little as possible while making as much as possible. Many investors, on the other hand, are unaware that spending as little as feasible might sometimes cost them greater money over time. If you're trying to like pinch pennies and say, hey, HVACs don't need to be replaced yet, so let's leave them alone and hope everything works out. And then 6 months goes by and like 50 out of your 60 HVACs busts at once. And you didn't have that in the budget because you assumed you'd be able to wait. Well, you should have put it in the budget, because if you know it needs to be replaced, you might as well go ahead and replace it now. Typically, our form is like, if I know that this particular item needs to be replaced in about 1 to 2 years, let's just replace it now. Makes the most sense. It's going to go bad in the next 2 years, and not a whole lot of like income potential is really going to shift over a 2-year time frame. So instead of smoking opium and hoping that we get to a point where we make enough money to be able to pay for that stuff, let's not do that. Let's just budget that in. So when it comes to renovations, you may have the option of paying less and waiting longer for the task to be completed. This is another thing. This is completely opposite from what I just talked about, but another great example. You may have the option of paying less and waiting longer for the task to be completed, or spending more and getting the job done sooner. Always take time into consideration while deciding whether to spend less or more. If waiting for a job to be completed would cost you money elsewhere, it's better to pay extra and have things done sooner. So we have an asset actually right now. We're in the process of transitioning property managers, and our current property manager has a construction arm, and they were in the process of renovating one of our buildings. And by the time that we get the new property manager fully onboarded, which we have designated to happen May 1st, our current property manager is telling us that they can have all of the renovations completed on this other unit. Now, the downside is that they charge a 10 to 15% premium on all the work that they do, as like they're like GC fee, right, for managing all that. So we're going to pay more, but the work's going to get done by May, so that when the new PM takes over, they can focus on their highest and best use, which will be management, leasing, marketing, which is what they're excel at much more than this other company that we're using now, which is why we wanted to transition. But one thing we could have done is we could have just said, this other company, tell them to hold off. We'll just have this other company do it because they're not going to charge us as much. And actually, we were going to save a ton of money on the construction, like tens of thousands of dollars, by 1, not having to pay the 10 to 15% fee, but 2, their in-house construction company actually, I forget how exactly it operates, but basically we get a discounted premium on every work, all the work that they do, because they manage our property. It's a very interesting structure, but it was going to benefit us massively. So we had an option to make. we had a choice to make of, do we wait for this other company to come in and potentially save some money? And maybe it takes a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, because they're going to have to start the process all over again of getting contractor bids in there and doing the whole shebang, which could have taken who knows how long to finish out the last 8 or 9 units or whatever we had left. Or do we just bite the bullet, pay the extra 10 to 15%, pay the premium, have the work done, and then we just have to focus on leasing? So we chose the latter, and we're just going to pay the extra 10 to 15%, make it happen, because time is of the essence. Time is always of the essence, and I choose to have things done faster and more efficiently than to try to save a buck. And if it means that I have to pay money out of my own pocket to make that happen, I'm fine with that. I'm totally fine. Now, hopefully you've structured your asset in such a way that that isn't a requirement, and you've raised enough cash and you have enough reserves, you have enough buffer and whatever your CapEx plan was. But if for whatever reason you don't, I guess the plus side of getting into this business and starting to make some good cash, right, is that you have cash to spend. So you then have some money after you've closed a few deals, so that if something like that comes up, you have the liquidity to get the deal where it needs to be much quicker. And then you just reimburse yourself afterwards when the next distribution comes, if there's enough money, and however you want to structure it. But it's not like the money's just gone forever. You're just like loaning money basically to the deal. So anyway, number 3. Go smart with your suppliers. Managing and maintaining big multifamily complexes needs a variety of inputs, which are frequently acquired from several providers. Working with tech-enabled suppliers may also result in cost savings, other efficiencies, allowing multifamily operators to lower their expenses while still providing amenities that support their occupancy goals. Multifamily property managers, for example, frequently negotiate bulk discounts from vendors, lower insurance rates with their insurance carriers. Similarly, by working with suppliers that have invested in smart tech infrastructure, multifamily operators may have access to data, gain a deeper understanding of their vendor's relationship, allowing them to optimize income and expenditures. So just having a relationship with some of these people, and hopefully this is something, and the reason this is a part of these like 10 asset management strategies is because you are basically in essence going to be the asset manager when you first start. You're not going to have an employee. But if you had an employee, if you had someone else managing all this, this should all be under their purview of what they look at and how they optimize performance. So having relationships with these kind of vendors, these kind of suppliers is massively beneficial. You know, we mentioned there's some property managers allow you to actually get on their master insurance policy when you bring them on as a property manager. So you can get discount, you can get insurance premium discounts that way. Although I don't usually like that. I mean, it sounds great initially, but I don't usually like it, because then once you decide that you don't like that property manager, which I hope isn't going to happen, but it's almost bound to happen, I feel like, in my experience. So once you fire that person, then you have to get new insurance. And then that's a whole nother shabacle you don't want to have to worry about with minimum earned premiums and everything else that goes on with insurance. And then that may not have been something that you initially budgeted into your numbers, because you initially budgeted the savings you were going to get because you knew you were going to bring in that property manager. So I just don't like to fiddle with that most of the time. Even if I do bring on someone who can give me lower costs for that, I prefer to have my own policy or my own setup so that I have a little bit more control. And I've actually built in all the factual financials for what may be the case if I do end up needing to go a different way property management wise. Especially if you're going to work with this property manager for the first time. Now, another thing is there are other vendors and other suppliers out there that really like to work with multifamily investors. So there are other vendors out there that have massive, like, maybe not massive is the wrong word, 20 to 30% kind of like bulk discounts that they get from their suppliers because they order in bulk, and then you don't have to order in bulk. So you just partner with them. They really just have like a bunch of big warehouses in your semi-local area, or maybe even national. Maybe they have a national like shipping company. And so then you partner with them, you get all the stuff that you need, countertops, cabinets, kitchen appliances, blah, blah, blah. And then you're able to get a, whatever it is, that 20 to 30% discount. So anyway, just having those relationships has proven to be massively beneficial for us personally. And so I could see it equally being beneficial to anybody else. Good reputation is critical. You guys already know this, just being in the real estate investing industry and business, but especially your property or your asset manager needs to have a good reputation with all of your employees, with all of your property managers, with everyone that you work with. because they're all going to be your day-to-day operators. So critical to have a solid operation when working with multifamily buildings or any form of investment. You want people to think of your company as professional and high quality. People not only want to work with you, but they'll also think of you when a project opens up. If you build a good reputation, brokers may call you when they come across properties that they think you'll like, may even partner with you in obtaining these assets as a result of your effort. So anyway, something you guys already know as far as good reputation goes, but it's also especially critical when it comes to your asset manager having a good reputation and just good character in general with all of your employees, and not just being like a terrible, leader. Number 5, partner up with a good contractor. One of the most important keys to effective asset management is to work with a contractor or ensure that someone on your team has contracting experience and expertise. Many investors employ a contractor to renovate their commercial buildings, which can result in additional expenses if you were to hire some kind of a GC or something of the sort, or even if you hired a property management company that had a general contracting arm and they charge you that extra 10 to 15% fee for utilizing their services. Independent contractors are only interested in serving their own company, not yours. Doesn't matter to them if they save you money, because their bottom line is to make money for their firm. When you work with a contractor, they have a financial incentive to be as cost effective as possible. If you don't want to work with a contractor, having someone on your team who knows how to contract is the next best thing. They may meet with contractors and compare quotes to ensure you're getting the best deal on repairs as possible. So having someone actually directly a part of the GP team as a contractor or some kind of like contracting experience is obviously massively beneficial. And hopefully the goal is that your asset manager actually is the one that has all of that contracting experience, so that they can be a very cost efficient and cost effective construction manager as well. Because that's, 10 times out of 10, I don't know about y'all, but I'm buying value add deals. So when you buy a value add deal and there's some kind of construction, renovation, something to be done, it's always going to be required that there be some level of construction management. So if you hire someone who's already excelling or has a high area of expertise in that area, then that only benefits you. It benefits everyone, but it obviously benefits you as well. 6, go for value add assets. We already know that. Going for value add assets is one of the most popular trends in multifamily real estate. Constantly finding properties with consistent cash flows, making modifications to boost the value, can give you the option of either increasing your income or simply selling the property for profit. There are various value add factors to consider. For instance, some properties will require basic fixing. It may not be that obvious. Therefore, you should be carefully assessing each property you find so that you can make a significant impact and boost your earnings, which all goes into the due diligence that we previously talked about. And your asset manager will be the one responsible for all of that due diligence, whoever that you choose that to be. Now, if it's going to be you and another business partner and you guys are both going to be tag team in asset management, then you both should be doing everything. You shouldn't just be like, oh, well, you're the asset manager. Have fun. You handle everything. It should be a team effort. But when you start scaling, it's going to come, you're going to get to a point where it doesn't make any sense for everyone to be doing the same thing, right? It makes zero sense. So you start designating specific people to handle that, whether they be on the partnership team or as an employee. Number 7, energy expenses. Energy expenses are a key consideration for multifamily managers, regardless of whether utilities are the obligation of the manager or the tenant. The expenses are included in a tenant's lease. The manager is accountable for them. If renters are responsible for utilities, whatever property managers can do to assist tenants in managing their usage can help the property compete in the market and meet occupancy targets. Multifamily operators may engage in smart technology and smart supply chains, but they can also invest in smart energy management strategies to lower their running costs dramatically. So just energy expenses in general, this is all kind of a part of the value add play in determining what actually makes the most financial sense, which I think we talked about in one of our last due diligence calls that we did, of just like all the different ways to add value, some of those energy efficient ways, and what all those ways were, if you wanted to get more clarity on that. Number 8, lease retention. It's obviously huge. And a lot of people don't put a lot of emphasis on lease retention. Some people just think, who cares if they leave? Whatever, evict them, get rid of them, get a new tenant in there and charge the premium. But honestly, it costs a lot more money than you think it does when you have to turn a unit. There's a lot more cost involved than simply just the turn cost. There's the vacancy cost. If you have to evict, there's the eviction cost, the legal cost. There's the opportunity cost that while you're going through the process of evicting, or while you're trying to get a new tenant in there, Are you actually missing out on a specific tenant that wanted to move in at a specific date? Like it could even be that you got the wrong tenant in there in the first place and you should have had a different tenant in there. There's just so many different things that go into it. So lease retention at all costs. If I can retain someone who's paying, that's to be the biggest thing. If I need to evict them, whatever, they need to be evicted. We need to turn, we need to get someone else in there. But if I can retain them and all I want to do is just increase the rent, then if my property manager and or asset manager can make sure that that person, that lease was retained and that person renewed, then I would rather pay a premium on that renewal. Some people like to do it vice versa. And they say, oh, well, as a property management company, we're going to charge $500 per, new lease because it costs us a bunch of money in marketing and this, that, and the other. And we got to go out and search for this person and we got to go through the application process. It takes a lot of time. I'm like, I understand all of that. Believe me, I do. But I don't see the benefit for both parties by me incentivizing you to go out and get new leases. Like, you just end up making a ton more money and I just keep getting whacked in the face by all my turnover costs. And then you can add this $500 renewal fee or whatever fee as a part of that turnover cost, because you're gonna have to pay it every time they get a new tenant in. So it doesn't make any sense. So I would rather you get no fee or very small. I'll pay you $50 or $100. And instead I'll pay you more. I'll pay you $300 or $400 or more, within reason, but I'll pay you a higher fee if you can keep that tenant in there. Because to me, that is a much more cost-effective route. Because one, you're going to be saving money on all the turn costs, but two, the goal of retaining that tenant in the first place is that you're charging the higher premium at the renewal. So it's like, hey, if you can give me a double whammy of charging a higher price and getting me that for the next year and keeping this tenant, shoot, yeah, I'll pay you $300, $400, $500. I'm not worried about it at that point. I'm still going to end up saving thousands of dollars on whatever turnover and everything else was going to be. So have at it. Lease retention methods, unsurprisingly, are an effective element of a steady long-term income plan. In other words, investing in infrastructure and services that best meet the demands of renters in a specific neighborhood is a wonderful method to decrease tenant turnover, and the initial expenses are frequently more than covered by the benefits of a lower turnover. So this is all something that both your property manager and your asset manager should be kind of like keeping up with, just market data, market statistics, making sure what is the actual new market rents of today? Have they changed since whenever our previous business plan was implemented? If so, what have they changed to? Why have they changed? What are they today? How can we best take advantage of whatever the new system is? And if you're doing like Section 8, what are the Section 8, voucher requirements? Have they changed since last year? If so, what are they now? What's the new premium we can charge? Same thing for LIHTC. If you're going that route or any of these other programs, making sure everyone is just deeply in tune. By everyone, I mean property manager and asset manager, with whatever needs to be happening. Because whereas your property manager, hopefully, if you have a really great property manager, is already doing all this stuff, 7, 8 times out of 10, that's not necessarily the case. They're handling a lot of the day-to-day. Sometimes they're inundated. Hopefully you haven't understaffed them. And so if that's the case, then that's where the asset manager comes into play and finding all the solutions to these other problems on a very much larger level, which we were talking about. And then they go in and speak with the property manager and make sure that it gets implemented on a more granular basis, and educating them on whatever that plan is, whatever the new route is, how you're going to get wherever you're trying to get, whatever that looks like. Number 9, get familiar with people who work with you. When you invest, you have the opportunity to work with a diverse group of individuals, and your team may vary from one project to the next, especially if you're using like general contractor or just like third-party subs coming in and doing different things. And maybe you have a different property manager that comes in, and maybe you've got a couple of different maintenance guys at different properties. You got all these moving pieces. Might be challenging to get to know everyone, but it's well worth the hassle. The more you know your team and they know you, the more effectively you can collaborate. If your staff knows you well, they may frequently save time by making judgments and carrying out tasks in a manner that you like. So hopefully you've already verbalized and communicated what all of that actually is, but the more they actually get to know you, and by you, I mean asset manager, whoever the asset manager is going to be for this property, whoever's going to be quarterbacking this deal, that person needs to be deeply in tune with everyone that's actually handling all of the day-to-day. even the regionals. So if you've got a regional manager, you need to be deeply in tune with the CEO, if they've got like an actual corporate structure at their property management level. So the CEO, you need to be deeply in tune with their accounting department, whoever that is, handling all the financials, because your on-site staff probably isn't going to be handling that. You need to be deeply in tune and connected with your regional manager if they assign you one. And then, of course, you need to be even more deeply in tune with the actual on-site staff. So whoever your leasing staff is, however many of those you got, whoever your maintenance techs are, however many of those you got, and any subs or contractors that property management company consistently outsources to get work done when you're overloaded on turns or overloaded on whatever, or maybe it's just a part of the CapEx plan. These are all people that you or the asset manager needs to go out and meet and know and see how well they work, and be just your asset manager at the end of the day is going to be like your COO or CEO, second in command, for making sure that this property or your entire portfolio, however you have it structured, is operating to its highest and best use. And lastly, number 10, organizational skills. Definitely critical. There's a lot of documentation and data and things that have to be organized for when it comes to just strictly asset management. Multifamily asset managers may piece together data from many parts of their activities to provide a larger picture perspective of their expenditures, efficiency, liabilities, overall organizational effectiveness as they collect data from various aspects of their different operations. They can then figure out where their biggest income potential is and restructure their departments, marketing, leasing, supply, maintenance, so on, to work together to take advantage of them. Although the concept of aligning disparate departments is ubiquitous in tech and manufacturing, sometimes disregarded in more conventional business structures such as asset management. So a lot of times people don't like to mesh all the different departments all into one because they feel like they're just a completely different department and they don't need to know about what's going on over here and what's going on over there. But as an asset manager, you need to be deeply in tune with what's going on everywhere and how the entire business is fully operating and functioning, so that you know the pivot points, the things that you can tweak and shift and change that are going to be the big driving factors of success or failure. Like, hey, if we change this, what's the actual process we're going to have to go through in changing this? Like, if we were to transition to a new property manager, you as the asset manager or whoever is the asset manager needs to be deeply in tune with the process that is going to come from exchanging and transitioning property management. One, so that you actually know what the heck is going on and you have a deep understanding of how to make sure who's doing what, and you know if it's actually happening effectively or if things are going awry in its most basic form. But two, you need to even know it on the front end before things ever actually start to happen, before you even make the decision that you're going to change property management companies. That person needs to know what that process actually looks like and how long it's going to take to do that, and what effect that's actually going to have on the overall success of the business plan. Like, oh, shoot, like us, we're doing this property management transition right now. Okay, well, are we going to be able to finish all the renovations on the asset that we already have? Yes, we already determined that's going to be the case. We'll just pay extra. All right, cool. We know that that's going to be happening. So now we know through this transition, how long is it actually going to take before the new asset manager gets in, gets all the information, gets uploaded on Buildium and whatever software they're utilizing, and gets fully up and functional on leasing, marketing, and just getting this property where it needs to be. How long is that actually going to take? And is that going to be an effective decision to transition that? Or does it make more sense to stick with who we have now and just wait it out a little bit longer? Like, is it going to take 3, 4, 5 months before this other property management company that comes in is going to be like up and running and start actually getting us to the leasing position that we need to be at? Because if we just stayed with this company in the next 3, 4, 5 months, we'll already be where we need to be, but it'll be much more costly and they're just not as effective as this other company. So would I rather have the more highly effective company at a cheaper rate? And if so, how long is that going to take? How's it actually going to affect our goal of achieving a refinance in the next, 6 to 12 months? Is that still going to be feasible if we change property management companies? So all of that's like something that the PM should be deeply in tune with and understand and know before you ever make the decision, so that that person can be not necessarily the deciding factor, but they can heavily sway your decision as the CEO or as the owner of the company, or you and your business partner, if you guys are managing together, you need to be deeply in tune with all that before you make that decision, because it's going to be a big decision, any decision for that matter. So organizational skills as the last one. And number 4, what makes for a good asset manager? With such a critical role to play, having the proper asset manager on board is critical to your portfolio success. It's critical to pick the right one. You must verify that your asset manager possesses following characteristics: communication skills, because you'll be communicating with your asset manager frequently. You want to be sure they can convey the information you want, including financial information. So do they actually have, excuse me, an understanding of how the accounting operates in multifamily, in strict like actual real estate investing? How should it look? Why should it look that way? Do you actually have that deep understanding? And if you don't, you need to get the understanding. Even if you were to hire it out and hire a bookkeeper and hire someone that's going to handle a lot of these operations for you, or a lot of your financial data for you, you equally need to have the same, probably even better understanding of how that operates than that person does, so that you know what things actually need to look like so you can be an effective manager to that person. You don't want to just solely rely on other people, even if they have a better area of like expertise than you. The only person I rely on that I don't have like massive levels of expertise in is my CPA. I just don't know a lot about the tax code. I know about as much enough to be dangerous, but I don't know all the deep detailed intricacies to like go and create my own, do my own taxes. But from a bookkeeping perspective, I feel like I'm very well versed. Underwriting, asset management, right? So many different aspects. I feel like I'm more well versed than the person actually operating what is being done, so that I have that deeper or higher understanding and can be a more effective leader, more effective manager in that role, which rolls right into number 2 perfectly: great leadership. They must effectively assist property managers and contractors to ensure that work is completed in the right order. They're equally assisting, if they're not a part of the GP team, they're equally assisting ownership and making sure that business plan is operating to its highest and best use. Excellent storyteller. Professional asset manager can tell your business plan's narrative to the right people and in the right manner, resulting in a welcoming community for your tenants and a lucrative investment for you. And analytical skills. Good asset manager should be able to handle and evaluate your property's pertinent data, key performance indicators. Therefore, a good asset manager always has a good working knowledge of rent rolls, evictions, occupancy rates, bad debt, and more. All this information is necessary for maintaining a productive property. Simply put, the property will not achieve the success it deserves if the asset manager is not skilled enough. And last but not least, number 5, what are the primary 10 asset manager duties? And this is not an all-inclusive list by any means. I'm sure there are more duties out there to be handled by asset managers, but this is a great start when you're buying your first deal. Cash flow management. Many real estate investors try to earn a steady cash flow so they can finance their investments, pay off mortgages, boost monthly earnings. Usually the cash flow is generated by rent payments from residential or commercial tenants. The asset manager assists the investor in improving the cash flow from their properties by finding areas to cut costs or by creating more profitable rental agreements, however that's actually structured. Finding lenders. An investor may need to secure financing to purchase or improve a property. The asset manager helps the investor find a suitable lender or loan. Now, you could have someone specifically as like your acquisitions guy who handles all this once you scale to a certain level. And if that's the case, then obviously that person's going to be handling finding lenders. But in the meantime, you as the primary asset manager are probably going to be responsible for finding lenders. Number 3, assist in property transactions, right? I mean, that's going to be one of the main key roles of an asset manager. May assist the investor with all the nuances that come with the purchase or sale of a property. That person is going to be responsible for helping schedule property like tours and making sure that the broker has all the information that they need. The asset manager does a lot, which is why they make $100,000+ a year as starting pay, plus all the fancy benefits, because they're going to be working 40, 50, 60-hour weeks, making sure your property is performing to its highest and best use. Negotiating property agreements and leases. The asset manager may draft property agreements and leases for the owner. It's up to the asset manager to craft leases that are appealing for tenants, but which are also profitable to the property owner. Now, most of the time, this is something that the asset manager can assist with, but usually it's your property manager, at least on the commercial side, who is primarily handling a lot of this, at least for leases anyway. But you want your asset manager to review those leases. You want to make sure that they're being reviewed before you ever even hire the property manager in the first place, and that it is going to be performing to where it needs to be, that they are saying they're going to charge a specific level of rent, and that they do have all the stipulations in there that they initially told you they were going to have, like no pets, or if there are pets, what are the breed restrictions, or what's the eviction policy, or what's the security deposit, and how much are you trying to charge for rent in this unit, and all the specifics that you went over with them when thinking about hiring them, as they were telling you what their leases were like. You want to make sure it's going to be the same lease that they're using for new tenants. Asset marketing. Asset manager may be tasked with advertising a property that the owner is selling or renting. The asset manager would create listings or find a suitable broker or property management company. Now, a lot of times what we found is that our property manager handles a lot of the marketing, but dude, you'd be surprised how many times they don't understand effective marketing. So that's when it falls on the asset manager, or in this case, you. So you will then be responsible for making sure that, hey, why are the Zillow listings not up after 4 months of me asking you to get the Zillow listings up? Oh, well, I promise we're working on it. No, you're not working on it. It doesn't take 4 months for Zillow listings. So then you might as well just bite the bullet and go in and do all the work it requires to get the properties up on Zillow. Like it's not super complicated. They make it more complicated than it needs to be, but that's something that you have to like micromanage with some of these property managers, believe it or not. Number 6, improve property values. Any property value can be improved. An asset manager will determine ways in which a commercial or residential property may be upgraded to boost its value and returns, which again is all going to be a part of the initial business plan, all part of the process as you're going through that acquisition, to determine what you can do. And hopefully you, since you'll be the asset manager, have all the determination that you need to know what that actually is, what value can be added. Or if it's not you, hopefully your asset manager has a deep understanding of what that could be, and hopefully has even more creative solutions that you may not even know, right? A lot of people think, well, I can do it the best, right? No one can do it better than me. A lot of entrepreneurs really think that way. But you'll find as you start to actually hire employees, that there's a lot of other people in the world that can do things a lot better than you can. And that's a good thing, because they're in the right seat. They're the right person for the right seat, right? And so just let them excel at what they do. Of course, manage. You'll equally be then managing that person. But anyway. Number 7, conduct market research. We talked a little bit about this. Real estate asset manager needs to be an expert in doing that market research. Asset manager carefully studies market trends to help the investor make good investment decisions. He or she will help the investor locate good real estate markets in which to invest. So I wrote this in such a way as if you're hiring an employee, right? Which is what we've talked about a lot today, about like the effective nature of an asset manager. But as you guys all know, it probably is going to be you asset managing in the beginning, which is fine. So just know this is what you need to be efficient at. Number 8, make financial projections. Analyzing the data on all the property owners' real estate investments, asset manager will predict how much revenue the investor will earn on his or her properties, or on prospective properties the investor is looking to buy. Number 9, develop a budget. The real estate asset manager will develop a budget for expenses and future investments. And we're actually going to go over what the budget should look like for one of the properties that we have, to give you a more granular look at how to develop that, because it's a little bit more different than just like your initial financial projections. It's kind of like the P&L, taking the P&L and transitioning it over to a budget. But there's a lot of nuances too, because those are all pro forma projections of what you expect the asset to perform at. But once you actually close the deal and actuals start coming through, then you need to be a little bit more accurate in your calculus, your calculations of what you were projecting versus what is actual. So you can understand kind of the trajectory you're on, and if you're actually even headed in the right direction for whatever your NOI goals are. And then lastly, 10, develop revised financial strategy. Real estate asset manager will develop a strategy to achieve whichever financial goals the investor desires. And this is something that we typically do before we ever close a deal, which we'll go over as well. We'll go over what potential, we call it like our asset management plan, real original, right? Just like what is the actual business plan, and how can I write that in such a way that I fully understand what it is, my investors fully understand what it is. My other business partners fully understand what it is. My lender, my property manager, like everyone, even people that don't need to know it. Like, how can I just make this super plain and simple? So we're all on the same page, shooting for the same goal. And so that everyone knows, like, what are my actual duties? What am I assigning myself as the asset manager? Or what am I assigning my employee as the asset manager for their duties? And that's all I got. That is part one, asset management, kind of the baseline level of what to expect as far as duties and characteristic traits, different things to look for when you specifically, or anyone you may be working with or hiring, should be effectively doing in asset management. There's gonna be a lot we're gonna cover with asset management because, again, it's like 80% of the worth of the work. So this is kind of just the foundation of understanding asset management, because it's different. It's a different beast than handling something like, I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have probably done some kind of like single family investment of some sort, and asset management for that is super easy. it's just you and one property, and you already know how the process is going, and maybe you got an Excel spreadsheet, or maybe you just keep notes on your phone. Like, it's just super simple and easy. Unlike need to call the contractor, all right, let me call the contractor. But once you reach a certain level, once you got 50, 100 plus units, and there's so many more moving pieces to the puzzle, how do you make things just a little bit more streamlined, both for yourself and for your investors in the business? So with that, I'll stop blabbing. Does anyone have any questions about asset management or anything?
Josh, of course, I always have a question. So, I noticed on some of these things, we task the asset manager with like negotiating property agreements and leases. For whatever reason, I was thinking like that would be like the underwriter's job if I hired an underwriter, if you will. Is that something you would really push on to the asset manager then?
So
Like
I think I see what you're
lenders and
asking.
that sorts?
Yeah. Since you're going to be the asset manager, you're probably going to be doing all this stuff anyway. But if we're to hire somebody and someone else is going to be handling it, they could, but again, I think what I was saying was they could potentially help you with the lending piece of it.
Yeah.
But if not, I mean, it's not super critical. You may have an acquisitions guy or someone in the acquisitions team that's going to be primarily handling all of the consistent acquisitions, which will be sourcing lending and they'll be really just deal sourcing. They may be responsible for all the due diligence, but it may also then kind of like after they get the deal in the pipeline, work through all the negotiations, get the deal under contract, and source the lender for the loan, then that may be the time where they segue it off to the next team or the next two teams, if we're really looking at it as a much more corporate company. And the next team may be investor relations to start the capital raise and start building the pitch deck. And then the other team may be the due diligence team or the asset manager, who's going to be responsible for making sure the process goes full fledged all the way to the closing table. Okay, so they could potentially help with that. But as far as like lease agreements, that was something I was saying they could probably more so help with after you close. So the third party company that you'll hire, which is what we've talked about, has been the company Heritage. They'll come out and they'll typically do your lease audit for you. So you won't have anyone in-house necessarily doing that. You could review it yourself, which you're going to want to, at least the lease audit that they give you, maybe see if they missed anything, but you don't necessarily have to because you're paying them and they're professionals and should have done it effectively anyway. But they'll do your primary lease audit of the leases that are there today. What I was more so saying is once you close the deal, just like every year or every 6 months, just make sure we're using the same lease, just confirm like the last, new 3 leases that they signed. What lease did they use? Did they change leases for any reason? If so, why? What do the new leases say? What do they not say? What happened differently? That should be all something that your property manager should run by you before just using a new lease. But some people are crafty.
So you would recommend that company Heritage to do your lease reviews as opposed to hiring a law office to do your leases, to set up like a lease template, and then that way every year you would just update it whatever you need to?
Well, you as the owner or asset manager, the property manager is typically going to be the one that's paying the attorney or paying whoever to structure the entire lease. You're just going to be reviewing to make sure that nothing was been oddly tweaked or changed or shifted and that it's all there, what they said was going to be there. So
Okay.
you're not necessarily needing the legal knowledge of is what's there. Like, did they change? And if you did need the legal knowledge, that's where your legal counsel comes into play and you could just ask them a question. Your asset manager could just ask them a question, but if not, and they didn't change anything, then great. You didn't need to include legal because everything's the same.
Okay, fair enough. Good, thanks.
So Josh, is one asset manager manages all your assets, or is there from your experience, does it make sense to cut them off at a certain number of units or certain, like, how do you make
Yeah.
that call?
Once you reach a certain level, it probably definitely would make sense. You can't have, I mean, it's just the same, it's the same situation with regional managers, like with property management. The asset manager is just a higher level manager who is even higher than they're like ownership, COO level type management of your investments. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe we haven't gotten to this point yet, so I can't entirely say, but maybe you cap them at 1,000 units. Maybe you cap them at 1,500 units, whatever makes most sense, depending on kind of like the locale of all the properties and how stringent and heavy of a lift those assets are. And then at that point, maybe it's time to hire another one who handles the next 1,000 or the next 1,500 units. And maybe they're in different regions too, right? Like maybe you have one that's all just for me, just all in the Gulf Coast. So all of our Mississippi, Alabama properties, we have one manager that handles all that. And then maybe we start buying up in Tennessee. So we just place another one up there that owns we own 1,000 units or whatever up there, and they manage those. So that would be how I would think it would be done. But effective today with the portfolio we have structured right now, we are taking turns with property. So Reggie's still like the primary asset manager. He still does a lot of the kind of month to month, week to week management of a lot of things. Especially with like financials and accounting and, you know, P&L, making sure like business plan, business budget, all that stuff. But if I live 10 minutes away from a property, which I do from one of our properties, then it makes more sense for me to be like boots on the ground for that asset, because Reggie lives like an hour and 15 minutes away. So it's not like it makes completely no sense for him to do that, but he lives so much further away. It takes me 10 minutes to get there and do whatever I got to do. So it just makes more sense for me to be the boots on the ground. So in that instance, I'm boots on the ground, have the deep relationship with the PM and our local team. And if they have any questions, everything kind of flows and funnels through me. I'm like the primary manager from that regard for that asset, but he kind of handles the top level, everything else that flows. So I just feed the information through to him. And then I'm like the executor on site. So he's technically still the asset manager, but I'm just the local guy.
Understood.
What do you got, Michael?
Josh, in your scenario of 1,000 units with one asset manager over it, you got property managers reporting to the asset manager, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Property manager being the day-to-day, they're actually putting together all of the data, financial information, and everything that feeds to the asset manager.
And just for discussion purposes, you got an asset manager over 1,000 units. How many property managers do you have within that 1,000 units?
When you say property managers, you mean like companies or you mean individual employees at each asset?
Okay, you said you had the asset manager in-house. I was assuming you had property managers in-house, but I guess you could sub that out.
Yeah, I mean, you could eventually have everything in house if you wanted to. You could get extremely vertically integrated and make it an entire full-fledged company that way if you really wanted to do it. We've started to do that. We didn't really start a property management company because we wanted to, more so out of necessity, but we're kind of working through the kinks of that. But we don't have an asset manager yet. It's still just the three of us from that regard. Just because they're so costly, we're like, we're probably at a point where we need one, but.
Well, yeah, I was looking at it, 1,000 units, just do, rough paper napkin, 1,000 units, your NOI, your annual NOI might be 4.8 million. Your employee benefits package to your asset manager, 150,000. It's like a 0.5%, of OpEx. So You
Right,
know,
so
property manager might be taking 8 or 10%.
Right. Depends on how you structure it all. But again, that $100,000, that's base salary, right? So
Yeah.
they've got all the benefits on top of that, which typically is like slice of the pie. They get a piece of the equity and they get, so much depending on how they perform. And then they also get bonuses and like commission-based incentives. So if they do really well and they achieve certain thresholds, then they make a ton of money. The guy who's actually potentially going to come and speak to you guys, we can ask him about it too. Because when I interviewed him on my podcast, I was asking him about his structure because he had the full structure even back when we chatted. I think it was a year or so ago. But anyway, he had an asset manager and he was like, yeah, I pay them like 130 or 140,000 as like base salary, but my asset manager is going to make almost 700 grand this year just from like bonuses. So you got base salary, but you've also got a lot more that'll end up coming, which is behooving to you because then if they're doing very well, then obviously you're doing very well. But you can't just look at the base pay. You had to look at the bigger picture of how much you're actually going to be paying out and how that's going to affect you and your larger fledged company, depending on how you're kind of like doing the flow chart financially.
Hey, Josh. Quick question. Can you share your biggest mistakes you've done with as it relates to asset management? Just a few things that come to your mind, biggest mistakes, like red flags to be aware of.
Man, probably do a whole call on that one. I would say one of the big ones is property management. Hiring the wrong property manager is so detrimental to the success or failure of your asset. So hiring someone who just doesn't know what they're doing or cannot perform at the level that they told you they could perform at, and you not specifically micromanaging them enough to even see the things falling through the cracks. Man, we hired one we hired one property manager. I may have told you guys the story before, but I can tell it again. For our 148 unit portfolio, which was the largest property we had bought to date. We had bought it in summer of 21. It was like the fourth property we bought. Fourth asset, and that was the largest to date. So we were super excited. We raised like $3 million or something for it. And we're like, this is freaking awesome. Most money we've ever raised. Get the deal closed. And we hired this property manager. And it was a property manager that had worked with us on 2 of our other assets that we had bought previously. And so we felt like they were going to have the capacity or ability to perform based on just our relationship that we had with them over the last 6 or so months, closing the other couple of deals we'd closed. And it could have been further from the truth. We should have done more due diligence, like going through the process. And one of the big failures was that we were friends with the guy who owned the property management company. So friendship is great, but it's not great if they don't know what they're doing and they're willing to screw you and stab you in the back, which who knows, you'll never really know until you try. So it's hard to tell, but there was more research and more number crunching and more just like knowledge I wish we would have had. And one of that pieces of knowledge is just that I don't ever recommend scaling with a property management company. So like, let's say you're starting your investment company. You buy a 50 unit, then you buy a 100 unit, then whatever. You got 150, 200 units. I don't recommend going with a property management company that only has like 10 units when you start. And then you give them 50 units. And then you get the next one and you give them 100 units. And now your portfolio is equally like 90% of their entire management company. You would think that's a good thing because they're going to spend so much time and so much effort on your properties, and it's going to be fantastic, and they're going to be cheap because they're scaling and growing with you so you can save a lot of money. But none of it is true because in all actuality, they are simply not going to be structured to scale at the rate that you're scaling. Because asset management and property management are just 2 totally different beasts. They mesh well, very well together, but they're two totally different beasts. So a property management company trying to grow at the same rate that a company who's just asset managing is trying to grow, they're just not, it's the same thing. So you're going to outgrow them much faster than they're going to outgrow you, if ever. So once you outgrow them and they no longer have the capacity or bandwidth to handle all these units you're giving them, things are going to start falling through the cracks. Your properties aren't going to be properly staffed. Ledgers are going to fall through. Tenants not paying rent's going to fall through. Evictions are going to fall through. Renovations, construction, CapEx, everything is going to start crumbling. And then you'll look back, speaking from experience, you'll look back after 6 months, look at your P&L and be like, holy cow, we lost over $200,000 in the last 6 months. Where did the money go? And you have no idea where it went because you weren't paying close enough attention to know where it went. And the PMs, especially after you fired them, they're dang sure not going to tell you where it went. It's just gone. So that's just one terrible example. Maybe it's a great example, but I don't recommend partnering or scaling with a property management company. So on the flip side, my recommendation would be to find a company who already has, let's say you bringing them 100 units. I want to find a property that at least has like 1,000 units. And I only want to be maybe 10% or less of their portfolio, because by that time they have scale. They have a team, they have a system, they have operations. Hopefully they've built significant relationships with other like vendors in the area. Maybe we can get some vendor discounts. Maybe not, whatever. Maybe they have a construction arm. They're starting to build. They're starting to get a little better at renovations and construction management. But anyway, long story short, don't scale with a management company. Bad idea. And maybe it was just the management company we scaled with because we royally got screwed. And I have told every person that's ever invested in this market not to partner with them since. I can't tell you how much business they've lost screwing us. So maybe they made 200 grand off of us, but can't tell you how much business they've lost since. So I don't know what their MO is. So if anyone's looking to invest in Mobile, just going to tell you while we're recording that Revitalize Realty is a no-go. Forget about it. Don't have anything to do with them. Bad management idea. And I've heard it time and time again from other people too. So I know we're not just a one-off like Nuance and they're just like fantastic managers with everybody else. Anyone else okay, Michael. Everyone else I've ever had a conversation with who utilizes them as their either broker, realtor, property manager, they equally have the same trials and tribulations and struggles and have equally lost money. And I'm like, cool, I know it's not just me. That's great. Makes me want to tell more people not to use them. But anyway, that's it. That's my story.
Josh, I think you had gone over this, but just a quick question. Since you're talking about PMs, what was the fee that normally is something we assess on them? Compensation?
For
Was it
property
like
managers?
Yeah.
Depends. So if you've got no payroll, it's also everything's up for negotiation, right? It's just a good rule of thumb. So if you have no payroll, 8 to 10% is what you could potentially expect to pay, depending on the level of renovations and complexity of your deal, for an asset management fee. And if you do have payroll, then you're closer to 3 to 5% plus payroll.
PMs could be 8 to 10% if we have no. Oh, you're saying when we're doing our underwriting?
Yes. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So but if they do send you the payroll, it's usually about 2 to 3%.
3 to 5%.
Oh, 3 to 5%. Okay. Oh, I see.
Everything's up for negotiation. I've seen PM fees as low as like 2.5%. But those are in larger metros where rent is like $200 to $2,500 a month. So the PM has the opportunity to make a lot more money. Those assets that are smaller, that are in tinier markets where the rents are like $700 a month, they're going to need a little bit of a heftier fee for it to make financial sense for them.
Okay. Perfect.
Well, I guess we don't necessarily have any time to underwrite anything, but we can finish it out with any last parting questions if anyone has any. Can't see like a bunch of people's faces. How sad. I wonder what everyone does sometimes. Sometimes when I'm sitting here just like blabbing and educating, coaching, like I wonder what people are doing on the other end of the screen. It's like falling asleep.
I was eating earlier, so I didn't think y'all would want to see that, and I just kind of left it there.
Yeah, I'm eating now, so same thing here.
That's true. Don't
My
necessarily
back
want-
was killing me, so I had to sit on the floor and I wasn't gonna keep my camera on. I don't have back support on my chair right now, so,
We all have alibis.
yep.
Maxie, are you currently like partnered with Revitalize? Is that why you said, oh man, good to know?
No, but I know a guy who works for him. And he used to do property management, but now he does like project manager or something.
Okay.
So I talk to him every now and then, but he worked for Irby too, so he's kind of used to that whole
Irby, I forgot about Irby.
environment.
Forgot
I would just
about
say-
Irby.
I was just saying good to know just because they're kind of got a decent name or a big name or a known name.
Right, in this little small area. Yeah, we were scaling and growing with them. I don't remember how many units they had when they first started managing with us. I think they had like 45 or 50 units when we first had them manage one of our properties, and we gave them a 42 unit, which like doubled their size overnight. And then 2 months later, we gave them a 34 unit, and then 2 months later, we gave him 148 units. So we were like the majority of his portfolio, and it didn't work.
They were loving you all.
Yep, they were.
They're like, we're growing so fast, guys. High five.
No, all
Not
these
getting a
management
Chris,
fees.
not getting a Christmas card this year.
Right. Well, Alex just joined us, everybody, in the last 10 minutes of the call here. What's up, Alex? I don't know if he said something. Couldn't hear you if you did say something. There he is. Okay, put the background on.
I know. He got his business information and everything on there.
IG, Facebook. All right. Oh, look at that.
Gotta get it done right, man. You gotta get it done right.
Cool. Anyone else got anything? Alex, you joined right at the butt end, so we're basically wrapping up, but it's,
I
we
just-
talked.
I just jumped in to say bye, everybody.
We talked about asset management, part one today, and we'll kind of continue that effort over the next couple of weeks, probably months. And one thing you missed that someone else may have missed who just jumped in, is there is I give it a 98%. I said 98% chance that I've got a guy coming to talk to us. I'm solidifying it tomorrow, which is why I don't 100% know yet, but a guy coming to talk to the group who went from nothing to over $2 billion in assets under management in 4 years. And he's got, I think, over 150 employees. So he'll just be coming and talking to us about how he scaled so quick, what he did, right? Secret sauce, that whole thing, just operations day to day, how to hire, how to fire. I've got 1,000 different questions I could ask. I won't hog the mic though. We'll open it up for questions. But anyway, he may be coming and chatting with us, and I don't know when that'll be yet, but I'll keep y'all posted.
You almost sounded like an Italian mafia boss. I got a guy. I got a guy. We don't know who this guy is yet, huh? Do we?
No, I'm keeping it vague because it's not
Okay.
official yet.
Well, if he's got over $1 billion worth of assets, I hope he's got something to talk about.
Definitely has something to talk about. Definitely. He's the actual CEO of the company, the head guy that started it way back when. So should have a lot to talk about unless he's
That'll be for Thursday.
No, I don't know when.
Okay.
I don't know when yet. I'm solidifying tomorrow. But all right, well, that's all I got. So If anyone has any questions between now and then, let me know. Otherwise, I'll upload this stuff to the Google Drive and chat with y'all soon. Later.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.